Welcome back to the home front. I'm your host, Reed Galen. Well, guys, today I'm coming to you from Tyson's Corner, Virginia, at the Hilton here. I am at the Network Nova Women's Summit this year. I am speaking later today, and so I thought that since it'd been a minute since I spoke to you, I've been on the road in Virginia. I flew into Norfolk late Tuesday night and went to Suffolk, went to Blacksburg, drove all over creation. And now here in Tyson's, not far outside of the town of McLean, Virginia, where I grew up until I was about 15. And so it's good to be back. It's good to see so many folks who are so excited about what's coming up here in Virginia this year. As far as the elections are concerned, Abigail Spanberger spoke last night. She's obviously the Democratic nominee for governor here. Remember, Virginia is a little bit of a weird place, guys, in a number of ways, but as far as the governor is concerned, you're only allowed to run for one term at a time. Is the moment that you get elected, you're already a lame duck. So it makes for a very interesting political dynamic, but very closely held state. It goes a little bit back and forth. It goes a little bit red. It goes a little bit blue. Northern Virginia tends to be very blue, which is Fairfax, Alexandria, Arlington, Loudoun. The rest of the state is pretty red, and then you've got some blue pockets. And so it's a fascinating place. It's a pretty good representation of the United States writ large. It's got a very large veterans population. You've got Quantico with the Marines and the FBI. You've got Norfolk, which is, if it's not the biggest naval base in the world, I think it's one of them. More than 100,000 personnel and civilians working there, and all the aircraft carriers and all that. So it's a good place to understand a little bit about where the country is. And I got to go to Suffolk, which is about 45 minutes west of Norfolk, very deep southeastern Virginia, for a town hall meeting. And not surprising, guys, there's a lot of veterans who retire in the area, a lot of older people. So cuts to the Veterans Affairs Department are very concerning. Potential cuts to Medicaid and Medicare are very concerning. And so this is one of those places that probably doesn't get a lot of attention from big campaigns because it's hard to get to. All things considered, the bang for your buck, vis-a-vis voters might not be that great. But again, I think it's one of those places that desperately needs more attention and has a lot of people who need help and a lot of things to tell people. That's why I spent so much time in rural Virginia, exurban Virginia this week. As you drive along west out of Suffolk, I stopped at the Appomattox Courthouse where the Civil War ended. Interesting to see that the room in the McLean House where Robert E. Lee formally surrendered, very small, very, very small. I think that Grant had about 6 or 7 staff members with him. Lee had 1 aide with him. The armies were about a mile apart on either side of this farm. And, it was hot and muggy. And I can only imagine what it would have been like for them, even if it was in April of 1865, to be wearing heavy wool boots in the mud. The Confederate Army had tried to break out that morning, the morning of April 8th, from the encirclement that Grant had tied a cordon around them, and it didn't work. And once they couldn't break out, that was when Lee said, okay, we're done. And so you also forget how far south Appomattox Courthouse is. It's significantly south of Richmond. It's almost the North Carolina borders. It gives you a sense of just the geography, which I didn't really understand until I went and visited. But again, another national park, incredible park rangers, as always. Take advantage of our national parks and our monuments while we can. The current administration seems to not be a big fan of either the Park Service or open lands, and we can get to that in a minute. Then I went up to Blacksburg, but on my way, I stopped in Bedford. My step-grandfather's family had a house there. I drove by it. It's still there. Looks like somebody's painted it. Looks like somebody's taking care of it, but I hadn't been there, guys, in probably 35 years. Yeah, maybe 30 years since my grandfather died. And he was buried down there. So it was interesting to see. I remember, the weird things that you remember, guys, about trips down memory lane and nostalgia. I remember being there. And the only reason I know it's 1984 is because I remember a very small black and white TV in the middle of an empty room as we were watching the 84 Los Angeles Olympics. I don't know why that particular memory sticks in my head, or that of my grandmother making a Texas sheet cake, which is this long sort of cake with chocolate frosting and all that. Those are the things. Again, as my friend Ron Insano, you heard on a previous episode, said, when you think back on nostalgia as a kid, if you're lucky enough, it's all the good things. You don't think about the things your parents and your grandparents were going through. But I think that's why nostalgia can be so intoxicating, is that it doesn't come with the weight of adulthood and responsibility a lot of times. Then I went up to Blacksburg, really cool town. The Blacksburg Tavern, guys, you absolutely have to stop in if you're there. Dan, the owner, incredible guy. The food was fabulous. And we did an education town hall there with about 3 educators and a young woman running for delegate, and I'll put her information in the show notes. And it was a really good reminder of why I do this kind of work and why I travel like this, the kind of travel that, as some of you who have been road warriors in your life, remember that you wake up in a hotel room and you don't know where you are, or you go out to the parking lot and you don't remember which rental car is yours. After 3 weeks on the road, I could tell you that I'm a little bit crispy and not built for it like I used to be, but I'm happy to be out here. So Blacksburg, incredible people. There's about 13,000 kids in Virginia who need state funding for Head Start programs or wraparound preschool care, after school care, lunches, meals, and just reminder that, the priorities that we make really do matter to individual lives, and in this case, individual Virginians. And it was also inspiring that these folks work so hard. One young woman, is doing this because she believes in it. Another woman who runs the facility where we held our event, she's got about 250 kids that she looks after, and about 15 of them are, really economically disadvantaged. They live below the poverty line, and she's got to look after them in particular. One teacher she goes to homes. She helps out homebound students. Could be blind, they could be ill, and she makes sure that they get the education they need to even get out of high school. And that is the kind of work that I think, requires not only a steel spine, but just the kind of commitment to humanity that I think we could all use, a few extra drops of. And then a gentleman who's an 11th grade history teacher. And you hear the stories of, very young children to kids about to get out of high school. And you realize that if you have kids, maybe it's a little bit easier to understand, but especially when it comes to education, every year lost is a loss that they can't really make up. I did some stuff in California on education. If kids have 3 bad years of education in a row, it's almost impossible for them to catch up. And for me, I think about how I see the world now and how I used to see the world, which is, why wouldn't we commit to investing in education, thinking differently about how we educate our kids from their first breath to the moment they graduate from high school, or till we send them on to trade school or a community college or even a 4-year college? Because if we prepare them when they're kids and they're young adults, there's a really good chance they're not going to need the government's help later on. And so that's what might be considered a left-wing position mixed with what would have used to be called conservative position. Why don't we take care of people when they need taken care of the most? And my guess is that they will surprise us by their self-sufficiency if we help build that foundation. And I think it's a really big question that we have to ask ourselves as a nation is, what are our priorities? What do we care about? And I think now is the time that we need to start asking those questions. And so let me zoom out of the greater Virginia area and zoom back into New York City. And the reason why I make that segue is because Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic nomination for New York City mayor. The 2 things that have tickled me the most were, 1, that Andrew Cuomo lost, and 2, that the Democratic establishment is losing its mind. At its very base level, let's be clear, Zohran ran a good campaign. Just as a campaign guy, not the issues, not the philosophical aspects of it. He ran a good campaign. He ran a campaign that brought people in, that spoke to the things they care about, the things that they worry about. And he was young and he was energetic. Andrew Cuomo ran a bad campaign. I promise you that somebody said, "Oh no, Governor, you can win this without doing anything." And so he did his version of a front stoop campaign. Didn't participate really, didn't really get involved, and he lost. Bad campaigns lose. This is yet more evidence of it. And so I think that it's a good reminder that a good campaign will win and will typically beat a bad campaign and a bad candidate when all things are being equal. And the Cuomo allies spent something like $25 million on TV and all the other stuff. And you know what? It didn't work. And I don't know how many times my Democratic friends have to understand that more money doesn't buy victory. If you have a candidate with no message and no ability or willingness to inspire or understand that we are in an anti-establishment, anti-status quo era in which a lot of New Yorkers did not want more of the same, especially after dealing with a guy like Eric Adams, that just saying, well, yeah, New York needs its asshole, and I guess we'll deal with Andrew Cuomo. Really? Like, this is the guy that had to leave office, and that's your excuse? Like, that doesn't seem very good. And as I wrote on Substack, and I'll put it in the show notes, is like, you're either okay with a guy like Cuomo and all the things he's done, or you're not. But if you're not, and you've held him up as an example of how people should be held to account for their actions, then he never should have been in the race in the first place. But that's where I think our Democratic friends have to decide what it is they care about. Like, if you're going to win, if you want to win, hypocrisy is really a drag on you. It's really a drag. And people say, oh, well, Donald Trump, but Donald Trump's been a public asshole for 50 years. He's been terrible all his life and in public. No one expects differently from him. But if you hold yourself up as the party of morality and decency, but then you say, well, in this case, I guess it's okay. Well, which is it? Are you okay with that behavior or aren't you? And if you're not okay with that behavior, then why are you supporting candidates that have committed it? And again, I'm not making a moral distinction between anything. I'm making a political distinction, which is you either believe in this stuff and you're going to abide by it, or maybe somebody owes Al Franken a heck of a big apology. All right, let me go on. So the last time I think I spoke to you was about Iran. There's the Supreme Court, all of this stuff. Guys, as I've said before, it's not on us to necessarily stand in front of the fire hose every day. It's on us to do the things we can do where we can do them, and that's typically going to be closest to home. Is it any surprise that the Trump administration bombed Iran? Maybe they didn't bomb it the way they told us. Maybe the damage wasn't as bad as Donald Trump said it was. There was a leak out of the Pentagon somewhere. Now they're freaking out about that. Guys, this is Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump's administration. They're incompetent. What did you expect? Right? What did you expect? And this is my fear, guys, is that the people around him are incompetent. I think that they were put in there on purpose, but it turns out that when you're trying to run something as big and expansive as the United States government, that some level of competence does matter, and they have very little of it. And my fear, candidly, is that like bombing Iran without much good intelligence, because you got the tail wagged the dog and you felt like you had to do something, is that they're going to stumble into something that they can't get themselves or frankly us out of. And really, guys, is my bigger concern. I think that what we see with these ICE raids, and I'm going to spend some more time digging into that. There's the tearing families apart and taking people who've been here for decades, when there are plenty of bad guys, I assume, that they could go get. But also, I saw a video, and I posted this on Instagram. Like, who are these agents? Because they don't look like federal officers. They're frankly not in shape. Like, they have cargo pants on and like polo shirts on, and they're wearing masks and baseball caps. But I saw one video of it. They're arresting this poor Chinese man who's screaming for his life. They don't know how to cuff him. And then some more goons come out of the woodwork, and then they throw him in the back of a rented Nissan Sentra. It just, none of it makes any sense. And so I think that's a good question to ask. If these aren't ICE agents, if these are not federal agents doing this, then who are these people? Where did they come from? What's their qualification? What are the rules of engagement? Have they been deputized federally? Like, those are all legitimate questions that we should ask. And I feel like a lot of people aren't asking them. And, if you're going to arrest someone for an immigration violation, again, if you've broken a law, I understand it. I don't like the methodology either of how they're doing it or to whom they're doing it, but I understand the legalities that could be employed for such action. But this doesn't make any sense. And this goes to me where I think this is a Stephen Miller operation. I think Stephen Miller is the worst person in the administration, and that's saying something at this point. But I think he's the one that really only cares about this stuff. And my guess is that what we saw after Los Angeles, where Trump said, no, we're going to lay off hospitality, we're going to lay off meat packing, we're going to lay off ag, right? That sent Miller into orbit. Then Miller got Trump alone and said, no, you have to do this. The base wants it. And Trump reversed himself again. Maybe, right? Trump always chickens out. He does, right? He does always chicken out. And then, the upside of that is that he backs off of hopefully his worst instincts. The weird bad news too is that people go, well, look, he says all this stuff and he doesn't really mean it. And so this is why he's slippery as an eel, and why, as I've said repeatedly, he's going to be here for the next 3.5 years. So we have to decide what it is going to come after him. And this is where I bring what comes after Trump with a Zoran Mamdani together. which is whatever you think about Mamdani's platform or his belief system vis-a-vis capitalism and socialism, he is calling the question. He is calling the question. He is saying, what's our driving purpose going to be? He's making the argument necessary and front and center. And my fear for my Democratic friends, and therefore for all of us, is that it is a question they're unwilling and unable to answer because they are still locked into a world that does not exist, a world in which they believe demographics will save them, a world in which people will just see how bad Donald Trump is and they will give them the keys to the car. And I don't know how many more times we have to see it, and I don't know how many more times I have to say it, that is not necessarily the case. I tried it. I tried it for the last 2 years. Donald Trump bad. Donald Trump bad for democracy. Donald Trump fascist. All of that. And it didn't work. Americans didn't buy it. If they're going to elect good people, different people, folks with a different vision, then we have to start offering that different vision. And what is that? And there's a really good chance it's not going to be what we've had. As I've said repeatedly, I use COVID, that middle of March 2020, as the demarcation line between the before times and the after times. Everything that comes after COVID is different than what it was before. Everything is different. How we act, how we operate, how we work, how our kids go to school. Why do we believe that the systems that we put in place in 1946 and 1947 and 1948 or the 1960s or the 1990s are capable of handling the things in which we have to deal today? That's not a radical idea. That's a thoughtful proposal, which is, how should the world work? How should America work for its people? Because, guys, we don't treat ourselves very well. We don't treat our fellow citizens very well. And I was having coffee with a friend of mine. He said, well, isn't that what people vote for? I said, yes, in the context of a system that doesn't give them many good options or any good options. Yes, that's what we vote for because we're almost a managed democracy. I'm going to give you 2 bad choices. Choose the one you dislike the least this time. That's not democracy. That is not democracy. That is not small r republicanism. It's not small l liberalism or small c conservatism. That is an oligarchy. And I don't think a lot of people want to live in an oligarchy. And it works for those for whom it works. And the other 98%, good luck. And I think we need to get past that. And I'm a little bit over caffeinated, but I don't think I'm wrong. And I think now is the time, as we have 3.5 years of Donald Trump, that we, yes, do have to navigate and yes, do have to defend against. And if and when we can and where we can and defend those who need defending, we also have to say, on January 20th, 2029, what do we want the world to look like? On January 20th, 2029, who do we want taking that oath of office? On January 20th, 2029, or 2049, or 2069, what do we want the world to look like, and what do we believe America's place in this world should be? And that's the kind of stuff that I want to spend more time talking about. That's the kind of stuff that I think we need to talk about. The Trumpocene era will come to an end when his presidency ends. Maybe we get J.D. Vance. Maybe we get some other Peter Thiel acolyte that wants to run as a Republican. But it's on us to figure out what that alternative is going to be. We know what the bad guys want. They've told us repeatedly that they always tell us, whether or not it's Trump or Project 2025, they're telling us what they plan to do. It's on us to give a viable, in my mind, viable alternative to the American people for what it is we should be offering, what we can say we need to do. And I think that's absolutely possible. And frankly, guys, I find that pretty exciting. I've been talking about Donald Trump for 10 years. Complaining about Donald Trump all day, every day is exhausting. And I'm not sure it moves the ball. In fact, I know it doesn't move the ball. And so I'm looking forward to these next few weeks where I'm going to be starting a new leaders series where I'm going to have young candidates, new thinkers on. I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll share it with everybody. I hope, guys, that you will rate and review this episode 5 stars, guys. The more 5-star reviews we can get, the more people will see and hear this show. And I think that's essential in this time right now. I can only say thank you all so much for coming on this journey with me, coming on these road trips with me. I've got a lot more to say. I've got a lot more things that I've seen that I want to share with you, and I'll do that too. In the meantime, please go to Twitter and TikTok and says.us at Reed Galen. Threads and Instagram at Reed_Galen USA, and Substack. Guys, please go over and subscribe to the Homefront. Please be safe out there. Please enjoy the beginning of your summer vacation, and I'll see you next time.